The first drops of rain kissed the observation deck as Lieutenant Commander Sienna Torres watched Earth's moon rise through the reinforced glass. She had seen this view 1,000 times, but tonight something felt different. The stars seemed dimmer, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Behind her, the bustling sounds of the orbital defense station carried on, oblivious to the feeling crawling up her spine. "You feel it too, don't you?" The voice belonged to Chief Engineer Dominic Reeves, a broad-shouldered man from the Scottish Highlands whose calm demeanor had carried them through countless crisis simulations. He stood beside her, hands clasped behind his back, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. Sienna nodded slowly, like watching a storm approach across an empty ocean. You can't see it yet, but you know it's coming. 3 months ago, the Galactic Assembly had sent their first distress signal. It arrived as a burst of compressed data, painting a picture of devastation that humanity could barely comprehend. The Velkari Swarm, they called it, a force that consumed worlds like locusts through wheat, leaving nothing but stripped husks floating in the void. 7 civilizations had already fallen. The message was clear: help us or be next. The Assembly had dismissed humanity's offer of aid with barely concealed contempt. What could a species that had only just mastered fusion drives possibly contribute? Their reply had been polite but firm. "Stay in your corner of space. We will handle our own problems. Thank you for your concern." That was 3 months ago. Now, the distress signals had stopped coming entirely. The silence was more terrifying than any scream. Sienna's tablet chimed with an urgent notification. Her blood ran cold as she read the message. "Dominic, get to the command center, now." They ran through the curved corridors, past startled technicians and off-duty personnel who jumped out of their way. The command center doors hissed open to reveal Captain Hassan Okafor standing before the main display, his dark eyes fixed on a sight that defied explanation. The screen showed a ship, but calling it a ship felt inadequate, like calling a hurricane a breeze. It was easily 3 times the size of humanity's largest carrier, its hull a patchwork of different metals and technologies, as if a dozen civilizations had contributed pieces to its construction. Scorch marks covered its surface. Sections of the hull had been torn away, revealing damaged corridors and flickering lights within. It drifted without power, tumbling slowly through the blackness of space. "Is that what I think it is?" Sienna whispered, her voice barely audible. "Galactic Assembly Vessel Infinite Hope," Captain Okafor confirmed, his Nigerian accent thick with barely controlled emotion. "Or what's left of it. It just dropped out of quantum space 200,000 kilometers from our position. No response to hails. Life signs are faint but present." Sienna felt her training kick in, pushing aside the shock and the rising tide of dread. She was a soldier. This was a crisis. "Deploy rescue teams. Medical bay on standby. I want structural analysis and radiation surveys before anyone boards that thing. We don't know what it's been through." The next 6 hours passed in a blur of controlled chaos. The rescue operation revealed horrors that would haunt her dreams for years. The Infinite Hope had carried over 4,000 souls from a dozen different species. Only 217 remained alive, scattered throughout the wreckage in pockets of life support. The corridors were filled with the frozen dead, their alien features locked in expressions of pure terror. The ship's logs, miraculously intact, told a story of systematic slaughter. They described the Velkari Swarm boarding the vessel and moving through it like death itself, relentless and unstoppable. Later, Sienna found herself in the medical bay, watching as human doctors and robotic assistants struggled to treat beings whose biology they barely understood. One of the survivors, a tall creature with iridescent skin and too many joints in its limbs, had regained consciousness. Its name was Architect Thane of the Consortium, and when it spoke, its words were translated through a small, elegant device embedded in its throat. "They are coming," Thane whispered, its 3 eyes unfocused with pain and trauma. Its voice was a low, rattling sound filled with a despair that transcended species. "The swarm does not stop, does not negotiate, does not rest. They swept through our fleets like we were children playing with toy boats. Our shields, our weapons, Our 1,000 years of peace and prosperity. It meant nothing. Sienna knelt beside the medical bed, her presence an attempt at comfort in this sterile white room. "How many ships do they have?" she asked gently. Thane made a sound that the translator interpreted as bitter, broken laughter. "How many drops of water in an ocean? How many grains of sand on a beach? They breed ships from the corpses of worlds. Every planet they consume becomes a factory for more vessels, more warriors, more death." Its hand, eerily similar to a human's despite the extra fingers, reached out and grasped Sienna's wrist with surprising strength. Its skin was cool to the touch. "The assembly was wrong to reject your offer. We thought ourselves so advanced, so superior. We saw your species as primitives playing with fire at the edge of the galaxy. We forgot that survival is not about technology. It is about will, about sacrifice, about the willingness to do what must be done." "What do you mean?" Sienna asked, leaning closer. "Your species has something we lost millennia ago," Thane said, its voice growing weaker, fading with each word. "You remember how to fight not for glory or honor, but for survival. You understand that sometimes the only choice is between extinction and becoming something you never wanted to be." Before Sienna could respond, to ask what that meant, alarms shrieked throughout the station. Red emergency lights pulsed, painting everything in shades of blood. Adrenaline surged through her veins. She sprinted back to the command center, her heart hammering against her ribs like a prisoner trying to escape. She burst through the doors just as the main display updated. It showed what every human being in space had dreaded since receiving that first, horrifying distress signal. Dozens of contacts were appearing at the edge of the solar system. Then hundreds, then thousands. An endless tide of red icons flooding the sensor screen. The Velkari swarm had arrived, and they had brought an armada large enough to blot out the stars. Captain Okafor's voice was impossibly steady amidst the controlled panic erupting around them. His command presence was a rock in a tidal wave of fear. "All hands to battle stations. Activate the Retribution protocol. Send the message to Fleet Command they found us. May whatever gods are listening have mercy on us all." Sienna stood beside her captain, her gaze locked on the approaching swarm. She saw not just ships, but a wall of hostile contacts moving with a terrible, unified purpose toward Earth, toward home. But as fear threatened to consume her, Architect Thane's words echoed in her mind. "You remember how to fight for survival." And she knew. Somewhere out there, beyond the orbit of Mars, humanity's secret waited. The project they had built in the quiet dark, that they had poured every resource into for the past decade, while the galaxy slept peacefully. The weapon the Galactic Assembly never knew existed because they had never bothered to ask what humanity had been building in the darkness between worlds. They saw primitives, but they should have seen survivors. The Velkari swarm was about to learn a terrible lesson. They were about to learn that humanity had been preparing for this moment since the day they first looked up at the stars and wondered what nightmares might be hiding in the dark. The hunters had become the hunted, and humanity was ready. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more. See you next time. 3 levels below the observation deck, the war room had become a cathedral of controlled chaos. Holographic displays bathed the faces of Earth's top military command in hues of blue and amber as they watched the Velkari swarm advance. Admiral Kenji Yamamoto stood at the center, his weathered hands gripping the tactical table. Decades of service were etched into the lines on his face. "Talk to me, Torres," he said, his quiet, calm voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Sienna Torres pulled up the tactical overlay, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "Swarm Vanguard will reach the asteroid belt in 14 hours, Admiral. Main force is 6 hours behind them. We're tracking 3,200 vessels. They range from destroyer class to something we have no classification for. It's the size of a small moon." "Their tactics?" Yamamoto asked, his gaze unwavering. "They're not trying to hide," Dominic Reeves interjected from his station. his Scottish brogue tight with stress. They're moving in a wave formation, a broad front. They want us to see them coming. Classic intimidation. In the corner, Architect Thane sat in a medical suspension chair, brought to the war room against every doctor's protest. The alien's breathing was labored, but its eyes were sharp, focused on the displays. "This is how they broke the consortium," Thane rasped. "They show you the impossibility of victory. They make you understand that resistance is futile. By the time they arrive, half your forces have already surrendered in their hearts." "Then they don't know humans very well," Captain Okafor said from the communications array. "We've faced impossible odds before, usually because we created them ourselves." A bitter smile crossed Thane's alien features. The assembly said the same. We had faced the corruption wars, survived the Great Silence, built an alliance that spanned 100 worlds. We thought we were ready for anything. The alien's voice dropped to a whisper. We were ready for nothing. Sienna watched the swarm's relentless progress. Her mind raced through countless simulations, but seeing the real thing made her stomach clench. "Admiral, I recommend we begin evacuating non-essential personnel from all orbital installations. We need to buy time for the ground-based defense networks to fully activate." "Negative," Yamamoto said flatly. "We evacuate, we show weakness. They see weakness, they push harder. Everyone stays at their posts. This is what we trained for." He turned, his eyes sweeping across every officer. "Activate Retribution protocol, full authorization. Bring her online." The room fell silent. Retribution protocol. The words carried a weight that pressed down on everyone. It was humanity's greatest secret, built in the shadows of Titan's methane clouds over 10 years of brutal, relentless work. While the Galactic Assembly had dismissed Earth as primitive and insignificant, humanity had been building something that would redefine modern warfare. "Retribution protocol acknowledged." A calm voice came through the comms. "USS Retribution responding. All systems coming online. ETA to Earth orbit. 4 hours." Thane's eyes widened, all 3 pupils dilating in shock. "What is Retribution protocol? What did you build?" "Something necessary," Yamamoto replied, his voice grim. "Something we hoped we would never need to use." The next 3 hours crawled by like years. The Velkari swarm continued its inexorable advance, smashing through the automated defense satellites humanity had placed in the outer system. Each satellite fought hard, died hard, buying precious minutes. The swarm barely slowed, crushing them like insects under a boot. Sienna found herself back on the observation deck as the 4-hour mark approached. Earth hung below, a blue and green jewel, achingly fragile. Somewhere down there, her sister was probably putting her daughters to bed, telling them stories about brave astronauts. Those little girls had no idea that above their heads the future of their entire species was about to be decided. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Dominic had joined her, his reflection overlapping Earth's image in the glass. "Makes you wonder what we're really fighting for. The planet, the species, or just the chance to see one more sunrise?" "All of it," Sienna said softly. "And none of it. We fight because the alternative is letting something evil win. We fight because surrender isn't in our vocabulary. We fight because somebody has to, and it might as well be us." The observation deck's speakers crackled to life. It was Admiral Yamamoto. "All personnel, this is Admiral Yamamoto. In approximately 30 seconds, the USS Retribution will enter Earth orbit. What you are about to see is classified beyond top secret. After today, it won't matter. The galaxy will know what humanity is capable of. Remember this moment. Remember what we built in the darkness. And remember that we did it not because we wanted war, but because we refused to be victims." Sienna pressed her hand against the cold glass, her breath fogging the surface. The stars seemed to ripple. Reality itself bent in ways that made her eyes hurt. Space was tearing open, quantum mechanics screaming as something impossibly massive forced its way through dimensions never meant to be breached. The USS Retribution emerged from quantum space like a leviathan rising from the depths. It was enormous, dwarfing even the largest Velkari vessels. But its size wasn't what made Sienna's breath catch in her throat. It was the design. Galactic assembly ships were elegant, all graceful curves and flowing lines, products of civilizations that valued aesthetics. Retribution was different. It was brutal, angular. Every surface was covered in weapons batteries, missile ports, railgun emplacements, and systems whose purpose Sienna could only guess at. It looked like what it was. 10 years of human ingenuity, paranoia, and sheer grit, compressed into a single vessel designed for one purpose: war. Dear God, Dominic whispered beside her. We actually built it. We really built it. The ship's hull was midnight black, drinking in light rather than reflecting it. Along its surface, words had been etched in letters 10 meters tall, visible even from the observation deck. They were in English, but Sienna knew translation algorithms would render them comprehensible to any species. We are the storm you should have feared. Architect Thane's voice came over the intercom, filled with a mixture of awe and horror. What have you done? What kind of species builds something like that and keeps it hidden? Captain Okafor's reply was cold, simple, and absolute. The kind that survives. The silence that followed Retribution's arrival lasted exactly 12 seconds. Then, the Velkari swarm responded with a violence that would have shattered any other species' resolve. A wall of energy weapons lit up the darkness between worlds, thousands of beams converging on the black warship that hung defiantly in Earth's orbit. On the command deck, Sienna watched the tactical display, her heart pounding in her throat. The beams struck Retribution's hull and simply vanished, absorbed by systems humanity had designed specifically for this very moment. The colossal ship didn't even shudder. Admiral Yamamoto's voice cut through the channel, steady as bedrock. Retribution, you are weapons-free. Show them what happens when you corner a species that spent 10,000 years learning how to kill efficiently. What happened next would be studied and debated for generations. Retribution didn't just fire back. It unleashed a symphony of destruction that redefined modern warfare. Railguns accelerated tungsten rounds to a fraction of light speed. Missiles that thought for themselves weaved through enemy formations, each one carrying warheads that bent physics in ways the Galactic Assembly had declared impossible. Directed energy weapons carved through Velkari shields like a hot knife through butter. But it wasn't just the technology that made the difference. It was the strategy. Every shot was calculated. Every missile trajectory served multiple purposes. Every movement of the massive warship was part of a larger dance that the Velkari swarm couldn't comprehend. Humanity had studied warfare the way others studied art or music. They had made it a science, an obsession, a dark gift passed down through bloody centuries. Within minutes, the swarm's vanguard was in chaos. Their formations, designed to overwhelm through sheer numbers, became death traps as Retribution's weapons found every weakness, exploited every gap. Ships that had destroyed entire civilizations found themselves outmaneuvered and outfought by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Dominic stood beside Sienna in the observation deck, his face illuminated by the distant flashes of battle. We're not just winning, he said, his voice a mix of wonder and sadness. We're dominating them. Everything we built, everything we prepared for, it's actually working. Nearby, Architect Thane had insisted on being brought to watch, despite the protests of the medical staff. The alien's breathing was shallow, its body failing, but its eyes remained fixed on the battle unfolding in the void. I understand now, Thane whispered, the translator turning the faint clicks into words. The assembly made a terrible mistake. We thought peace made us strong. We believed our technology and our unity would be enough. But you never forgot the most important lesson. What lesson? Sienna asked, kneeling beside the medical chair. Thane's strange, multi-jointed hand reached out, gripping Sienna's with surprising warmth. That the universe doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't matter if you want peace or war. What matters is whether you're willing to do what's necessary when the monsters come knocking. We lost our edge. We forgot that survival isn't a right, it's a privilege earned through constant vigilance. You never forgot. You looked at the stars and asked not what wonders they held, but what threats might be hiding in the darkness. The battle raged for 6 hours. 6 hours that saw the Velkari swarm, undefeated for decades, learn what it meant to face an enemy that had been preparing for them since before they even existed. And Retribution wasn't alone for long. Suddenly, humanity's fleet emerged from hiding places throughout the solar system. Ships that had been disguised as humble mining vessels or deep space research stations revealed their true nature. Earth had built an entire armada in secret, each vessel crewed by men and women who understood that they were the thin line between survival and extinction. From the command station, Captain Okafor's calm voice directed the symphony of war, coordinating thousands of personnel across dozens of vessels. Echo Squadron, press the left flank. Delta Wing, protect Retribution's ventral approach. Remember your training. Trust your instincts. Make humanity proud. As the battle raged, Sienna found herself thinking about her nieces again, about all the children on Earth who slept peacefully, unaware that above them their parents and siblings and aunts and uncles were fighting for their future. She thought about every human who had ever looked up at the night sky and felt small, insignificant, vulnerable. They weren't small. They were survivors. They were the descendants of beings who had crawled out of caves and built cities, who had survived ice ages and plagues, who had stared into the abyss and decided to light a fire instead of surrendering to the dark. The turning point came when Retribution targeted the Velkari command vessel, the moon-sized monstrosity that coordinated the entire swarm. The alien ship, recognizing the danger, tried to retreat, but humanity had learned from its own bloody history. You don't let the enemy regroup. You don't give them time to adapt. You press the advantage until victory is absolute. Retribution's main cannon, a weapon that required the entire ship's power grid to fire, charged for 30 seconds. In that time, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Then it fired, energy equivalent to a small star's output, focused into a beam narrower than a human hair, shot across the void. The Velkari command ship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a floating fortress that had survived 100 battles. The next moment there was only expanding debris and fading light. The swarm broke. Without their central coordination, their ship scattered, fleeing into quantum space with humanity's fleet in hot pursuit. It was over, against all odds, against an enemy that had crushed civilizations far more advanced. Humanity had won. Admiral Yamamoto's voice came over the station-wide speakers, and for the first time, Sienna heard emotion crack through his professional demeanor. All ships cease fire. Begin search and rescue operations for any survivors, both human and Velkari. Today we showed the galaxy who we are. Not conquerors, not savages, but protectors. We fight not because we love war, but because we love peace enough to defend it. As a cheer went up across the station, Sienna turned back to Architect Thane. The aliens' breathing had grown weaker. Medical personnel were gathered around, but she could see in their faces that there was nothing more they could do. Thane's biology was too different, the injuries too severe. The alien knew it too. "Tell the assembly," Thane whispered, using the last of its strength. "Tell them that humanity earned their place among the stars not through technology or diplomacy, but through the courage to stand when others would fall. Tell them that the species they dismissed as primitive just saved the galaxy." The alien's eyes found Sienna's, and in them she saw gratitude mixed with regret. "Tell them that sometimes the most advanced civilization is the one that remembers how to survive." Thane's eyes closed for the final time. Sienna stood slowly, her hand still warm from the alien's touch. Around her, the observation deck filled with personnel who had fought and bled and sacrificed. They stood together in silence, watching Earth rotate peacefully below, a blue jewel that had just proven itself worthy of its place in the cosmos. Dominic put a hand on her shoulder. "What happens now?" Sienna looked out at the stars, at the debris field that marked humanity's first major engagement with the wider galaxy, at the ships returning home with their wounded and weary crews. Now we do what humans have always done. We rebuild. We remember. We prepare. Because somewhere out there, another threat is waiting. And when it comes, we'll be ready. She smiled, though tears tracked down her cheeks. We'll always be ready. That's what it means to be human. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales from the stars. See you next time.